Welcome to the Total Human Optimization Podcast. We're here with John Wolf and Corey Peacock, who is the exercise physiologist and performance coach for the BlackZillians team. Welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
What are you doing here in Austin today?
Right now, we have a conference, International Society of Sports Nutrition. I would say a really top-of-the-line organization trying to make changes in the sports performance world, kind of go against the grain at what people believe is right, and I think they're making a huge impact when you look at sports performance and the things that they're researching and doing. So came out here, to Austin for the national conference and enjoying my time out here.
Right on. So how do you know our man John Wolf over here?
So John and I kind of just came in contact when I started with the BlackZillians. I reached out and John got a hold of me. And I think with what you guys are doing in terms of your collaboration, your connection with MMA, we just found a lot of things in common, a lot of similarities. Injury prevention, mobility, things that, he and I both have in common, and here I am.
Right on. And John, so how did you find out about our man Corey over here?
Again, it's been pretty cool since being over here at On It. It's been really interesting to observe in more ways than one. We just continue to attract really amazing people, whether they end up being part of our team or just somebody we collaborate with, short-term, long-term, and more often than not, right? We can maintain those relationships and things. That's the platform we built here.
Sure.
It's all about relationships. And so Corey reached out, and I was out in Miami not too long ago. We just happened to be in the same area, and that's when we connected again on the phone.
Yeah.
And then now he's here in Austin. So, things start rolling like that, and you start seeing like, man, there's a reason why there's all these opportunities to catch up. We really need to make this happen.
No question.
And then, it just really, I find it interesting, that he's serving as an exercise physiologist and now performance coach for one of the top MMA teams in existence, and I just
from what I understand, not a lot of teams have the luxury of a medical team, right?
No, not at all. I mean, right now, I would say, when you look at mixed martial arts, when you look at the UFC, I think the biggest problem that you are seeing out there right now is this lack of support, and I think it kind of trails off where you're looking at all of these events, and I would say at least one fight on every major card is being scrapped because of some sort of injury that realistically, not that everything can be prevented, but putting structure, putting these, a medical team in place around your athletes. It's just, it's the way the sport has to move in order to survive and keep progressing like it has. I just want to say, it's almost like, they're a little bit behind in the times when you look at where mixed martial arts is, and this is probably because it's a relatively new sport, but when you compare it to the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball and that kind of thing, I think resources, time, and all of those things, it will evolve, it will change, but I think that's the thing that, the BlackZillians are doing differently. They're putting those pieces in place, trying to make this a professional sports organization like it would be if you walked in with the Miami Dolphins or, the Chicago Bears, whoever you're talking about.
So Corey, I think that, even the title itself is like, man, that sounds pretty cool. But I don't know, even myself, put it into context of how you serve your role within the team structure of the BlackZillians. I know that that's evolved recently and over time, but when you first went in there, you kind of have a cool story of how you got in with them, but what were you doing when you first got there? Like what kind of testing or what kind of support, and then how does that evolve?
Sure. All right. So I'll kind of just give you the background. Got to South Florida, made a lot of good connections with University of Miami, Miami Dolphins strength and conditioning staff, Florida Panthers strength and conditioning staff, just a lot of good resources. Same thing, like how I met John, just reach out. What do you have in common? What can I help with? And that kind of thing. So, MMA fans, very familiar with Vitor Belfort. At the time, he was just looking for just pure exercise physiology testing, VO2 max, some strength testing. Where am I at baseline before his previous fight with Chris Weidman? contacted some of the coaches in the area, and a few different people gave him my name. So I just, kind of one of those things, the right networking, the right connections. And, so he reached out to me. He's a member of the BlackZillians. We started with that, just general testing, strength testing, mobility testing, functional screening, body composition, VO2 max, all of these things to just look at him physically. And from there, it just evolved. So, we kind of, the way I look at it, what I started off doing was athlete profiling. Let's look at it from a physiology standpoint, from a biomechanics standpoint, and let's put a profile together and, give this to the strength and conditioning coach, the coaches that are going to be working with them. And I'll just say, really lucky because the BlackZillians head strength and conditioning coach, Jake Bonacci, awesome guy, man, and really receptive to this. I think it's hard to walk into a setting like that where, you want to implement scientific, scientific resources and that kind of thing. And without the right support and the coaching staff, you're not going to do that.
Oh, you'll hit a wall real fast.
You'll hit a wall really fast. And, I was really lucky to have the opportunity to work with him because he's really scientific based. He's really big into injury prevention. He's been doing it for a long time. He's spent 6 years out in extreme couture. And I just think him and I really came together and looked at a way that how can we help these athletes? And, that's how everything started. And, I just, in terms of coaching experience and that kind of thing, I've spent time at University of Miami with their strength and conditioning staff, and I played football myself, so I'm just used to that, more of that team structure, coaching staff, and that kind of thing. And, working with Vitor and then kind of getting brought into the BlackZillians. I think some of the other coaches, Henry Hooft is the striking coach, Greg Jones, wrestling coach, George Santiago, head coach, and BJJ. I think the chemistry was there, the connection, the idea that all of these guys are realistically looking for the best support for their athletes. I mean, they have some of the best fighters in the world. How do we take it to that next step, And
so John was saying that one of the things you've implemented here is technology into the whole thing.
Absolutely.
So what kind of things are you doing to accumulate that data with the athletes, and how are you analyzing that data to make the changes you need to make?
Sure. Well, let's see. Where do we want to start with that? Let's start with the Ready Band. Seems like the easiest thing. Right now I'm using this. It's a sleep monitoring device called a Ready Band through Fatigue Science. I know, I was telling John, Seattle Seahawks kind of made it famous. They were wearing it the year they won the Super Bowl. Miami Dolphins are using it as well, along with a lot of other sports teams. Really cool in the regard that it's going to give you a readiness, a reaction score, your ability to perform. So I look at these athletes and I look at their, what I would call their readiness throughout the day. And if they're at a certain point, somewhat in the higher scoring system, that they have the capabilities and are less likely to be injured doing complex things such as, strength training, jiu-jitsu, all of these different very complex practices.
So what exactly is this band reading?
Reaction speed, and also sleep. So it kind of a combination of the two things.
Okay, so a combination of those two things.
Yeah.
And it's something you wear on your wrist?
You wear it on your wrist,
yeah.
So what it does, it kind of it tracks your movement patterns, your accelerometer, your movement throughout the day on the wrist, and it pumps out that score for you. And I'm using this in conjunction with a lot of other things.
What are maybe just like the top three pieces of technology that you're using right now?
Okay, so Ready Band, Fatigue Science, definitely one of the best. We're using something known as the Viper system, Stat Sports. This is a GPS tracking system. With this, I think it's great data, and I think it's going to be very beneficial, but it takes time. Right now, unfortunately, I would say in terms of implementing anything with this data, we're not at that point yet.
So GPS, like tracking, movement activity is Is it tracking anything other than GPS? Does it have accelerometers and gyroscopes as well?
So some of the things that I look at, some of the marks for performance that I'm looking at accelerations, decelerations, sprints, impacts, collisions, where it can actually read that, where if you get brought to a certain halt, then they're going to give you a higher stress score on the body. They look at stress, they look at tension, they look at load. Another really cool thing that you can do with this is you can actually lay out the athlete's movement pattern. So let's just say throughout a wrestling practice, this might show you that this athlete led with the right leg 500 times in this practice and maybe stepped back or avoided a takedown with the left leg. Well, now looking at this from our standpoint, you're going to create imbalances this way, right?
Yeah, and shoot, man, too bad you can't get that data on the other fighters, huh?
Yeah,
on the opponents,
exactly
right?
That so you know where the
help a
weaknesses
little
are.
bit.
You're like, hey, he's gonna move back with his
I
left.
bet you Vegas has that info.
Oh, I bet. Hey, there's stats on that somewhere. Maybe Corey doesn't have access to it yet, but if he gets hooked in with the right person, maybe. And what would you say about the third? So you had the Ready Band, you had the Viper, which is that GPS tracking, and then what would you say is the third one that you're using right now?
Realistically, I think the next most important, they're all important. I'm not going to rate them 1, 2, 3, whatever. The Omega Wave.
We use that here in house, or we're actually using it. A select few of us are using it in house to try to get a little more familiar with the technology and see, how that data is actually impacting and driving our decisions with our training as well. So, So what's your take on the Omega Wave?
It's great. I will say this right now: the Omega Wave is spot on with the way it reads an athlete. So what it does, just for those people that aren't familiar with it, it's going to use a couple of different readings looking at heart rate variability, and it's going to give you basically a look at your metabolism, how efficiently you're burning the different fuels in the body. It's going to give you a look at the efficiency of your nervous system, how complex you can train, how coordinated, how fatigued you are. And then it'll also give you a reading of the cardiovascular system. So you're looking at 3 different systems with one piece of equipment. And it's huge. I mean, I will say this right now, it's one of the pieces of equipment that have allowed us to really manipulate the athlete's schedule to tax a certain energy system and then allow it to recover while still taxing another system, where it's, we can attack cardiovascular. We know he's going to be drained the next day, so now let's move into some sort of neurological stress.
And I think, maybe that might be lost on a lot of people, is the importance of utilizing and stressing different nervous systems and also allowing for that time to recover that energy system before you tax it again.
Sure.
And it's a lot like, if you look at it that way, it could be a lot like circuit training versus an interval where you're doing the same exercise for multiple rounds, and you're like that buildup of fatigue, the buildup of specific fatigue to that activity, it can become overwhelming very quickly. Whereas if you do a circuit and you say, okay, well, there's 3 exercises, we're talking about 3 different energy systems, and we work one, we work the other, we work the other. Well, that's almost like, well, at least for that specific activity, 2 units of time. So it's a 1 to 2 work to rest ratio as far as how you're taxing that one energy system, and that's what you're talking about here, right? Just like we would use circuit training to maximize efficient use of our muscular activities. You get to use this device and kind of monitor, and maybe you're not always maybe it's not always such an even cycle like that either, right? And so you're getting this objective data and saying, well, hey, you know what? We really thought you were going to be ready to do this metabolic activity.
Sure.
But now we're just going to do like light rolling or movement skill work or decompressive work to make sure we allow for these systems to come back online.
There's no question. And, you think about this and look at this, this kind of that idea. You really have to have a good coaching system in place around you to take your word for that. A wrestling coach, for me to go up and say, hey, I know this is what you have planned, but what can you do to change this and back this intensity
up? It's not going to go over well.
And that kind of thing. And that's what I mean. Luckily, like I said, our coaches have been so receptive to this and have seen the benefits and have seen the athletes peaking at the right time. And, really, along with myself, I would say what Jake, the strength coach, is doing, we're not seeing a lot of injuries in the gym. And that's the biggest thing. If our athletes are healthy,
So give us some examples. You don't have to use names of the fighters,
Sure.
but give us some examples of situations that have come up where you've had to change training because you've identified something using these tools.
Sure. I'll just say, when you look at the schedule and you look at the things that these guys are putting their body through on a daily basis, there's so many different practices and so many different stresses where, you look at something like wrestling and the complexity of those movements compared to just something general like where striking, you can maybe gauge it back a little bit more and all of these things. I would think that's the biggest thing that we've had to change is, for us, we don't want there to ever be a red flag for any of these fighters. If it's on the schedule that they are practicing, they're going to show up and they're going to practice. It's up to us to make sure that they're blinded of the fact that this is what's going on. This is what it is. And because at that level, to be a top fighter in the world, there's a lot of,
they can turn it on anytime they need to, but it may be costly, right?
Exactly right.
So maybe if we backpedal there, just to make sure I understood.
Yeah, go for it.
So as a team, maybe what you're saying is like, we don't always tell the fighter what's on the schedule, because then they're going to want to perform whether it's in their best interest or not, what's on the schedule, because it's like, you're not going to hold me back. Just like I'm not going to hold back in the cage, right?
Yep, you're exactly right.
They want to go hard. So as a team, you guys have to kind of be, okay, well, we're going to test, and we're seamlessly based on that data. You must already have an action plan saying, okay, well, if he scores this, then this is what we're going to do. If this that we're going to do. I mean, you're going to categorize, the outcome somehow so that it's seamless. The handoff. I'm telling you that sounds ideal, but I know, in terms of thinking about implementing that here, we have a gym, we have a performance side of the gym, we have most of our gym, we cater to the general population. I thought, man, integrating this technology would be awesome, but it'd have to be like an executive fitness program where basically they have full access to not only one-on-one coaching, small group coaching, and the team training or the classes, but to be able to say, okay, based on this decision, this is how they're going to use the plethora of options we have at our disposal. And right now we're a small staff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, we can't really do it now, but I think we're going to be able to do it in the future.
At some point.
And it sounds to me like that's what you guys have to do already. And that takes a lot of coordination.
One thing that I'll say, and I'm thinking about your situation with, all of your clients, all of your athletes and that kind of thing. One of the easiest ways, I think, for us to implement it, looking at heart rate. I think one thing that we've done with our polar monitors, we've kind of went away from the idea that, I guess just a generic example, we're not doing 15-second intervals anymore, 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off. That's not the way it is anymore. With these athletes at this level, we have all of the data through all of this technology. We have their thresholds where we can bring them to a certain target peak heart rate, and that's the end of their interval. Now we let them recover. Sure. Whether that takes them 3 seconds or 15 seconds, they hit that mark, we bring them back down. It's an individualized thing where I think heart rate monitoring is definitely the easiest way to do it, to give, if you have somebody in that situation, okay, today we know that we know their body's stressed, we know their body's fatigued, let's give them just a aerobic maintenance type training zone and allow them, hey, if I see 155, I can back it off and that kind of thing. And I think that's a good way to possibly implement that.
Now, again, it's funny, Corey, having you on, it's awesome because you operate at a technical level that's obviously much greater than mine, right? I mean, due to your experiences. Sure. And I mean, you're a researcher in the field. You're applying that in your experience with this team.
Sure.
And I really respect that, and it's awesome because
I appreciate that.
I've been in the fitness game for a while, but I told you when we met, my experience is very much in application. Yep. In the practical setting, in just a gym setting with general population primarily. But right. I also worked in a system that taught tactical readiness. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we're talking about right now, and I think maybe, based on that experience, I could speak to a little bit, and you can elaborate on is what people don't always realize is like there's not generalized zones, and it's not only just specific to you, but to understand that the one global truth about that is that your motor skills, your cognitive skills all diminish gradually and then rapidly as you come over various different heart rate peaks.
Yeah, very much.
And so from a tactical readiness situation where we worked with military, law enforcement, fire, rescue, things like that, a lot of the game there is you're in unreasonable situations of high stress over durations of time. So your ability to manage your, mindset, focus on slowing your breath to indirectly control your heart rate and to regain cognitive function and motor skills in times of high stress. That's essentially what you're training these guys to do by hitting different peaks and then bringing, basically it's like, you want to work again, show me you can recover. Recover your heart rate, right?
It's huge.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And with these guys, that's one of the biggest things that we're really trying to do. It's, we're really trying to push this idea of recovery. And I think that's where we've established this threshold type training where recovery is one of our biggest focuses. To just think about this from a tactical standpoint, from a fighter standpoint, the idea of being able to recover a heart rate, to be able to recover the body 30% greater than your opponent, and step up there and look him in the eye before you're about to go do what you have to do. It's huge.
Well, it's Aubrey, our CEO, he's always talking about, it's a battle of wills, it's a battle of beliefs. And,
no question.
When you have someone like Conor McGregor, and it's you're not just fighting the man, you're fighting his belief system. And if it overwhelms yours, and it's a tough deal. I mean, a lot of times, a fight's over before the fight's over.
No
you
question.
see it in the man's eyes.
No question.
They don't have the fight in them anymore. The belief is no longer there, right? And so when you have these advantages, like 30% faster recovery, I've seen my recovery improve. I was already a top tier fighter, and I know that not everybody in the game has access to these resources and tools. How much more belief can you have? And also, not only that, just physiologically, I think a lot of times it's about, we were about total human optimization. So what is optimization is managing resources, right?
No question.
And so energy expenditure, recovery, that's managing your resources. You're still, a system. You run out of fuel, you run out of power, you're still human, right? You have limitations.
No question.
But if you can optimize your use of those resources, maximize the efficient recovery methodologies, then you're sitting pretty good as far as being able to use your skills. It doesn't mean if someone's more skilled, someone's tougher, someone's better that day, it doesn't guarantee you win, but it means that you're going to be able to give your best fight.
No question. That's it's funny that you say that, because it's one of those things. Anytime I get the chance to work with one of these fighters, when we're in the baseline, when we are just doing the pure physiology and we're testing and we're setting up the game plan as coaches, the one thing that I will promise them is I promise you will be performing physically the best that you can, and you will be healthy. Other than that, it's on you. And that's the truth, because you may go in there and you might be performing against somebody that skillfully is better than you. There's nothing we can do about that. But if we can put you in there healthy and performing at your best, that's all we can do.
Yeah. So obviously, there's the general public who may not have access to these tools. They're not going to go into a UFC cage anytime soon in their lives, but they're looking to optimize the way they exercise and the way they perform in whatever they want to do. So as an expert in this field, working with these top tier athletes, what kind of advice would you give, to the general public in terms of that?
That's a tough question right there. I mean, it really is.
Maybe we could tie it to something a little more specific.
Yeah, sure.
So a lot of what we talked about in technology, you're wearing a high-tech piece of equipment that's monitoring, your reaction speed and your sleep. The Omega Wave is not a wearable so much, but it's pretty accessible these days. They have accessible. a new technology. But what about like Apple Watch and all these new wearable apps, wearables that are actually, I feel like, hey, you give Apple Watch 5 years and they might be doing everything Omega Wave does.
Yeah, seriously.
Might be able to call 911
I think
for
you're
you.
Right. I think
pulse
now
is too high.
Yeah, that would probably be the easiest thing though for me to say. How do you become more in tune with your body? I mean, honestly, I would say one of the Fitbits, the Polar Watches, the Nike Bands, and that kind of thing. Just kind of establishing these goals for yourself and that kind of thing. But I mean, that's kind of a tough question, really. I'm detached from the general public right now.
If you're in the general public, you're screwed.
He's like, I want the cool shit, man. I don't play with everybody else's toys.
But you know what? So I guess this would be a cool topic real quick before I'm going to get away from the general public right now.
All right.
Just because it's easier for me.
You're on your own.
But one thing I was going to say, so looking at this and optimizing performance, we'll go back to the optimizing performance thing. One of the really cool things that I look at with this watch system, like for instance, we're looking at, we have a guy fighting, Eddie Alvarez is fighting in Mexico City. Looking at the changes in time, looking at the changes in circadian rhythm and that kind of thing. These monitor your circadian rhythm. So we have this ability now. Well, where do we have to peak our athlete? Well, we have to peak our athlete tomorrow night at 10:30 at this time. It's going to be 12 o'clock that time. We have other fighters going to China, going to all of these different places where we not only have to peak them for that date, but also the time that they're actually going to be performing.
I noticed that.
Yeah, jet lag sucks.
I noticed that. I noticed sometimes we do these Instagram takeovers with our fighters. And they took over Instagram account and they kind of show what they're doing with their training. And we're like all day long, it's like, wow, they haven't posted anything all day. But then come the nighttime, that's when all their training comes, because they're training the exact same time as if they were going to, as their fight is going to be.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that you have to do. And I think here's always the hard thing. People always ask me, well, how do you change these sleeping patterns? How do you change these habits? How do you shift the circadian rhythm? The easiest thing for me to say would be go to bed earlier, go to bed later, whatever the case is. But that's the hardest part to control. So I always find that the waking time, what you're doing upon waking is the biggest thing. I look at this idea, how do we start altering circadian rhythm? I think about cortisol and those kind of things in the morning. Well, let's wake up, let's stimulate the nervous system, let's do something, let's shock the system, even if it's 3 minutes, even if it's a couple of med ball slams, let's just hang one out, a static hold, that kind of thing. These are things that we can start doing earlier in the day to start pushing the circadian rhythm forward. This is actually kind of crazy, and I need to look more into it. I probably shouldn't say it since I really have no backing other than just talking to somebody at this conference, but they were talking about one of the best ways, this was the topic we were discussing, and one of the best ways to move circadian rhythm forward is a high protein diet or a high protein meal before bed, really late at night. And I don't know the science behind it, and I probably shouldn't have brought it up, but
I'm fine with that personally.
We'll check back in with you. I'm sure you'll test it out when you get back to Florida.
That's kind of the plan because I'm interested in that, because that'd be great.
Everybody would love that.
Yeah. Let's eat big before we go to bed.
I'm going to bring it back to general public.
All right, go for it.
Because it's where I live too, right? And again, remember with On It Academy, with our education system, and even everything about total human optimization, it comes from, hey, like, how can we draw from your experience and then translate that value to the people we serve, to our community, right? And so, not to say some of them won't want all the gadgets at the same level you have, and to be honest, they're more accessible now than ever, and will continue to be so. But the stuff that I thought was kind of relatively low tech, and there's a couple things that were just habitual, and I think that those things we can hit on because everybody has access. Everybody can get a heart rate monitor at this point in time.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And starting to understand your reaction to various different stimulus, and then managing like the recovery, the conscious recovery aspect. That's something that should be accessible to every gym goer.
Yeah.
So like, instead of just saying, okay, the variable is time, there's in-house here, we also track velocity on different lifts at times to measure your neural output, right? Yeah. So if you're tired, you do a jump and you don't accelerate the same way.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So in this case, that's still accelerometers on that. It's not necessarily super accessible. What you can see is if you are in a state of high stress, it takes you longer, like a chronic high stress state. Your heart rate will not recover nearly as fast. So you can start monitoring how well you recover from session to session and start modulating the intensity based on that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty simple. You just set a threshold, like say, you can go off the super generalized chart, 220 minus your age, max, and then set some percentage range and say, I don't go until I hit 60% of my heart rate max, or I don't go until I hit 50% of my heart rate max. And then, there's various different breathing techniques and things like that. Of course, we might go into that in another podcast.
Sure. But
a little preemptive there. But in any case, you could do something like that and be very individualize in your approach to fitness,
Sure.
and still, gain a lot of the insights that you might be gaining through a lot of the tech, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And then something else you had said, and this is something that I try to harp on as much as possible, is it doesn't matter how much sleep I get. It matters the first conscious choice I make every day determines my potential for energy throughout the day, or the consistent production of energy. So if I wake up and I basically say I'm going to turn over and go back to sleep, basically I'm going to feel like that the whole day.
All day, no question.
And then you had said something like, shock the system, and so med ball, so it's power output. You said a static hold, so that's a high tension field, but it's over a longer duration, right?
Exactly right.
And then you could do a pure mobility open chain stuff, or you can do a yoga practice, and you can cycle through a lot of these things and see how your nervous system responds in on ramps, up ramps.
Yeah. Going off of that, one of the cool things, going back kind of to the Omega Wave, the Omega Wave does a good job at letting you know if you're sympathetically driven, parasympathetically driven. Something that I just think of with that is that kind of, if you're overactive that day, how can we still stimulate the system but at not such a high degree? And I look at like foam rolling and densities and kind of things like that. If we're overstimulated, let's back off the intensity. Let's give them the soft foam roller. If we're understimulated, let's give them the PVC pipe. Let's really shock the system right here and that kind of thing. And I think that's cool, because we do that a lot in the morning. Here, this is what you have for the morning. We have your readings. Go jump on this foam roller.
So if the sympathetic is like really low that day, but you want to upregulate, do you ever just go out and outside and tell them, hey, go outside and pick a switch? I'm going to beat you myself. I won't even get a foam roller. You don't get a foam roller, not even a firm one. I'm going to hit you. You might get hit back in your line of work,
I'm
man.
saying in my field, they'll work my arm. Hit me back with it, but now that it's one of those things. It's just all of this technology, all of this stuff that you have. I think there's a great way, like you said, we could implement this like general public and that kind of thing as well. You just need to find what's more practical and that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, the Omega Wave technology itself, so it monitors your central nervous system, your metabolic system, right? Cardiovascular system. And so you look at that data, and basically it drives most of the decisions. It could drive most of the decisions we would make. Yes. And that technology is like $300.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's really, really cheap.
Yeah, for an individual unit. Yeah, I know the team unit, it monitors like toxicity. So if you're like detox systems are overloaded, and also one other marker that was really interesting. But hey, that's a $10,000 unit. But for most people, if you're in that market and you want data, you're using wearables. You're starting to integrate this heart rate recovery methodology that we were just talking about to vary the intensity or duration of your intervals versus work rest ratios. You may want more data, and hey, you know what? The same technology you're seeing at the BlackZillians, and I know a couple other teams that are using Omega Wave, and it's continually starting to pop up in new places.
Yeah, I'm starting to see it at other teams too.
Yeah, that hey, as a consumer, you can check that out, and
no question.
And man, it's some great data. It's
eye-opening into robots.
Yeah. I mean, seriously.
We're driven off electrical impulses, man. It's all miserable.
You think about that technology now, man, 20, 30 years from now?
Well, that's what I mean. I'll say this, though. The funny thing is, you look at a lot of this stuff, when you look at, like, the GPS systems and all of those things, I will say, it's surprising, I guess, for me, because I don't really know much about it, but the rugby, soccer, different things like that, the European sports, Australia, they're kind of setting the standard for where all this sports science stuff is, and it's all coming here now. But it's been stuff that they've been doing 5-10 years and that kind of thing. But it's really cool now to see this transition and where it's taking professional sports here. So it's really, really cool. But I think the one thing you were saying with all of these things, it takes time. You have to take the time to collect the data and see if it is accurate and that kind of thing, and if it works with your athletes. And with these three things, I've just found that these are so accurate and they're reading the athletes well. This Ready Band's cool, where it's like you become obsessive with it, where you're checking it all day.
So basically, they tell me at 3:00 I suck, right? That's when I crash.
Yeah, it's funny. I think like when you look at the actual thing, it gives you ratings. 90 to 100%, you're at full capacity. 80 to 90%, you're at whatever it is, and 70% you're at as if you just drank 6 beers or something like that, where they actually give you, this is you actually being legally drunk is where your body's at. So, me being...
Let me mess up your band real quick.
Well, that's what I'm saying. No, that's the funny thing. If I sit out and I'll have a beer, I'll check it and it drops. I'll have another beer. I check it.
I don't think I want to know that.
Like how it does that.
I mean, make that a party game where you're just like, let's see how far
let's see how
low
you can drop. That kind of thing. It's funny.
Go directly to the hospital.
You're
tequila overload.
One more drink and you're dead.
Yeah,
across the thing. But all of these things, it's cool to experiment with them and stuff like that, and know where your body's at. And I think for me, it's easy because I'm not performing like these guys, so I can damage myself. I can take a day and just run myself into the ground and see where I'm at. Can't do it with these guys, but it's cool.
That's amazing to hear those technologies and to see how they're going to apply and where they're going to grow.
Sure.
So where can people find you, Corey? Where can people follow you on social media and keep up with what's going on?
On social media, I'm on Instagram at Dr. C Peacock, so you can follow that. Not a lot of stuff on there. Not a huge social media guy, but you can find some stuff on there. On Twitter. BlackZillians webpage as well. You can find me.
And your fighters got any big fights coming up?
We have tomorrow night. Eddie Alvarez is fighting Gilbert Melendez. Co-main event. That's going to be a battle. I'm telling you that right now. I can only speak from Eddie's side, but he had, this training camp was flawless. Good. Yeah. This guy just, and Eddie, it's not like this is any different for what he does, but the guy is as professional as you can get out there, and the way he carries himself and the way he practices and that intensity that he brings to the team. I'm really confident in that he will do well. Now, Gilbert Melendez is a great fighter. There's no question, and I think these two are going to come out there and they're going to scrap, and it's going to be a war. But obviously, I think Eddie has the edge, and we're pulling for Eddie.
Right on.
Yeah. So we have that. In terms of other fights, if you're following the BlackZillians, there's the reality show right now, BlackZillians American Top Team. We have a couple fights coming up. Unfortunately, I cannot give those away right now since it's still airing. But there will be the finale, so we have a couple of good fights for that card as well. Caesar. One of our fighters won Ultimate Fighter Brazil. He's fighting Jorge Masvidal on that same card at the finale. So, big fights coming up.
A lot of action for this team.
A lot of action coming up. Yeah.
It's been they came on the scene hard and they came on the scene fast, and now continue to make the presence known. I think adding the type of resource that they did with bringing you in and of course they had to attract the right team to be receptive to that information. But man, if that's any indication as to how things are going over there, and I'm sure it is, then I'm sure that you'll see a lot of big fights coming up for people in your camp.
I think
continuously.
I think there's no question. I think there's a lot of talent over there. I mean, there's no question. There is a lot of talent, and there's a lot of up and coming talent as well. These guys that just come in and they work and they see, you have people like Anthony Johnson, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort setting the bar so high for where these guys want to be. I think it's one of those things that as a young fighter coming in to see what it, even me, just stepping back and coming in and having a chance to meet Anthony and having a chance to meet Vitor and, see them right now as they, just recently fought for title fights and number one contender spots. It makes total sense why they are where they're at. I mean, there's no shortcuts. There's not anything. These guys work day in and day out and put in the time and then some.
Yeah, and then they get the whole team around them. They got the technology.
There's no question. There's a reason why they're
leave
where
every
they're
stone
at.
unturned.
Yeah.
There you go.
Keep an eye out, man.
Exactly.
We keep on watching them from over here.
That's right.
We're kind of into that scene around here.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, John. Yeah. Thanks, Corey.
Hey, I appreciate it, you guys.
Thanks everybody for listening. Catch you next time. Later.
For sure.